Hello, welcome to Claret and Blue and our Inside Bodymoor show for the West Ham game this Sunday. I'm Dan Rolinson, joined this afternoon or this evening or this morning or whenever you're listening to this by John Townley. And before we get started, John, there's been two podcasts come out this week, a Q&A with Dan Bardell on Monday, and me and Matt did a show on Thursday where we picked out like best 11s, but it was like a draft and you had to pick 11 players from 11 different nations. Now, those videos were recorded last week, even though they came out this week. And I've had the week off this week, so I feel very out of the loop when it comes to Aston Villa news. I'm very out of the loop when it comes to podcasting because I've not done anything fresh for 10 days or so. So forgive me for any mistakes through this. How are you, John? How's things been while I've been away?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. I was off myself on the first week of the international break because it's always quite dull, especially for the job that we're doing. Literally just come back from Emery's press conference. So, yeah, plenty to talk about heading into West Ham. We could go into the top four this weekend as well. Although top five, top four this season, it doesn't really matter, does it? But it's nice to say top four. So, yeah, looking forward to the game. It'll be a tough one, though, for sure.
Yeah, it feels like a really big game, doesn't it? The opposition preview, spoiler, is back this week and will be coming up later in the show. And it feels like a big game where West Ham, Newcastle, Villa, Brighton are in that kind of cluster of teams below the traditional top four. And it's up to one of those to kind of crack it over the course of the season. So I know when we did the Brighton preview show, you were saying, like, yes, they're a difficult side to play, but they're going to be somebody that's going to be up there. So you consider them a kind of a rival. So you want to beat them. Same can be said of West Ham as well. I don't think they have got the side to be, to push the top six for the entire season, what with the Europa League commitments they have as well. But Aston Villa playing West Ham at home, I do have this as a game that is firstly winnable and one that we probably should win if we have those aspirations of top five, top four. This feels like a pretty big game to me.
Yeah, it is a very tough game, especially because of the record we've got against West Ham. Have we beat West Ham since we've been promoted? I don't recall that we have.
Saw a stat on social media posted this afternoon. Villa are winless in 10 games against West Ham, which is 8.5 years. Obviously, there's time in the Championship there as well for us. And winless in 14 games or 13 years against David Moyes.
I think that doesn't have too much bearing on the game on Sunday because the last time that we played West Ham at home anyway would have been the start of last season. I think it was Fornals that had like a deflected shot. They won 1-0 and that was one of Gerrard's final games as manager. So I don't think it will have too much of a bearing. However, yeah, they do have a very good record against us and they've won the last 3 at Villa Park as well. I think you're right. They're going to be up and around those positions that we'll be competing for. Again, a similar question to what I think many people will be asking of Villa later in the season, I think, about whether they can juggle Conference League and the Premier League. But I've said for a while, I think if Villa can go far in the Conference League, it'd back us to win it by then, because I know this might sound stupid, but if we're not in the Conference League by then, I think we'll have a good Premier League campaign because we've obviously got a lack of football apart from weekend games. But if we're going far in the Conference League, I think that means that we've kind of got over the kind of the difficulties that we've had at the start in terms of losing to Legia, just about beating Zrinjski Mostar. And I am a bit wary about those two particular performances. Can we change? And that's something that West Ham found out last season. We won't be finishing 14th like they did. They're a very good team, and I actually think they've probably improved as well over the summer. Obviously, they sold Declan Rice, but they've recruited really well, which you don't see very often when players are sold for big money. So fair play. They've done well to get in Ward-Prowse. Alvarez is a good player. So, yeah, will be a very difficult game. And they beat Brighton away, didn't they? 3-1. Won 2 of their first 4 away games, West Ham as well. So they'll be coming to Villa Park confident that they can get a result too. I think they salvaged a point against Newcastle last time out as well, 2-2. So, plenty of good players on the team, and it'll be a good game.
Yeah, and Villa have got a great record at Villa Park. Obviously, the last game played there was the Brighton game. Any side now that is, what the hell is that, John?
What was that? What's going on? It's not my birthday, by the way.
We were just talking before we came on that Macs have updated and I've got a blurry background I can't really turn off, and you've got balloons on your screen now for some reason.
It's not my birthday, but we'll move on.
Whoever comes to Villa Park now will want to be the side that stops Villa winning consecutive games. West Ham will want to come with a decent enough away record and think, well, we can stop that winning record that Villa have got. All right, let's move on to the presser. It's the first time you've spoken to Unai Emery for what feels like donkey's years. How was he?
Again, I think this press conference, the press conferences at the moment, they're kind of, you've won this many games at home now, so what happens next? And Emery always just says that they don't want to look back on what they've done. They want to look forward and to kind of improve still. So I don't know. I mean, there weren't too many takeaways from the press conference in terms of exactly what Emery said, but it kind of just reinforces the message of him always looking to make improvements with his team, and they're not the finished article yet. And he spoke well about Pau Torres's adaptation, to the team, and about how important he is. Torres himself, I think, said in a interview that will be coming out before the Chelsea game, he joined Villa. Before the West Ham game. He said that he joined Villa because Unai Emery is a brand himself in terms of the way that he plays football. Not many managers do that in world football in terms of how he does it and the kind of attitude he has towards it. He's always applying himself day to day, and he lives and breathes football, as we know. So, Emery kind of spoke about Torres and different bits and bobs, but the main takeaway is just that he's always looking for that improvement still, and he's not kind of content with everything that he's seen this season, and he is expecting more improvement from his players in the coming weeks.
I actually want to condense the presser and the injury updates section pretty close together this week, just to really hone in on Moreno and get your thoughts on him a little bit. So what's going on there? Why is he not available yet? Is this a major worry?
No, I wouldn't say it's a major concern. He's obviously had that hamstring injury, and when he came back, he had a setback in his recovery, the final stage of his recovery. I don't know how many people watching have pulled the hamstring or had it was more than just pulling his hamstring. I think he might have had to have surgery on it as well, just some minor surgery. He's been out for months. Mm-hmm. But it's different from running, in a straight line. You could probably do a 100-meter sprint or something, Moreno, but then it's changing directions, it's moving in different ways, and that can obviously impact your muscles, and that's probably what's happened. I don't know that for sure, but he obviously was on the bench against Palace, on the bench for Legia as well, and then missed the Chelsea trip. So it's a setback that he's had. Why is this coming up again?
For people that I'm not going to be able to edit this out just because of the way the conversation is going. So for the people that are listening, every so often John's screen changes to a load of balloons. Like, on Twitter when it's your birthday and the balloons float up on your profile. That is happening on John's StreamYard camera for some reason.
Where were we? Yeah, Alex Moreno. So he's had a setback, as we know, and he was supposed to be returning to training this week. Obviously, the start of this week. Again, I don't think that's happened in terms of a full squad training. He's obviously training by himself as well. Again, you can't put a date on it. You're probably looking in, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks or something. That would probably be the kind of optimistic look at it, because again, he's at the final stage of his recovery and he's progressing. But like Jacob Ramsey, they've suffered setbacks, and Villa will be cautious with it. They're not just going to throw them back into it because of exactly what's happened. So clearly, it's at the end of their recovery, they need to be careful. So, maybe if it was a normal process, he'd be back next week, but they might add another week or two on just to make sure. I don't know, but you just got to be careful with it. So it seems like we're saying after every international break, but after the November international break, hopefully we have a fully fit Alex Moreno and hopefully Jacob Ramsey as well. So that left side can finally be complete, which is something that we thought we'd probably get last month, let alone the start of November. So it's a frustrating one.
I mentioned it a couple of times in the show, so let's get it in here. The Opposition View is back. I spoke to Mark Wyatt, who's a senior reporter at football.london, to get the lowdown on West Ham United ahead of Sunday. Right, Mark, thank you for joining me on the podcast this afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Thanks for joining us. I've got 5 questions for you. We've tried to do this for most games this season, but we've missed a few. And I'm sure that Villa fans will be pleased to see the Opposition preview back. The first one really is just a kind of general overlook of West Ham seasons, really. What would the ambition be for West Ham, do you think?
I think a bit of stability wouldn't go amiss for a lot of West Ham fans. Last year, obviously, a European trophy was probably beyond everyone's wildest dreams, but the league form, as I'm sure you're aware, wasn't really good enough. A bottom half finish and struggling with the relegation threat for a while. So I think this season you've seen a different West Ham on the pitch. They seem a bit more stable in the Premier League, especially, and the European games are going well as well. So I think if you asked any West Ham fan what they'd like, and I mean, another trophy would be fantastic, but they'd bite your hand off for that. But I think just a bit of stability, avoid that kind of rush you get in the January, February period where you're looking over your shoulder at relegation. So if West Ham can get past Christmas and be in a safe position and can focus on the the Europa League maybe, then I think most West Ham fans would be happy with that.
Just, it's not one of my 5 questions, but as a spin-off to that first answer you've given, obviously last year you mentioned the league form dipped off, was it 15th in the end? But obviously you win the Conference League, which gives you a trophy, European pedigree and whatnot, and obviously a great day out for the fans as well. What was like the trade-off there like? Because I wouldn't want to see Villa drop down to 15th place, even if they won the Conference League. I want to be up around the top 6. How did the fans kind of feel about that?
I think there was obviously, I mean, David Moyes, his popularity kind of ebbs and flows, doesn't it? There are times when he's the messiah for West Ham fans, and there are other times when, people want to chuck him out along with most of the owners. But I think it's difficult, isn't it? Being in that bottom half and looking over your shoulder, you're almost too focused on the next game, and you can't really plan too far ahead. So I think you're right. I mean, Villa fans got kind of had the opposite last year. They kind of started quite slowly, and then obviously brought Unai in, had a fantastic end to the season, which gives you that confidence going into those key months, which is, like I said. So I think the big thing for West Ham fans, they were upset about the form that they were in, but there were promising signs, and I think with the summer window they had now, I think it's almost a forgotten memory, especially with where they're performing at the moment in the Premier League. So it wasn't fantastic to see them start, a bit ropey in the Premier League. But I think fans, a first European trophy in, 40 years, and, you just can't take that away. No matter how that season is remembered, it's always going to be the Conference League. It's always going to be Prague and that night. So, I don't think they've minded too much. But fingers crossed that this year is a little bit more promising on all fronts, really.
You mentioned the transfer window there. How do you rate that transfer window? Obviously, similar in some ways to the year that Villa had when they lost their talisman in Jack Grealish for a similar fee, around 100 million. You've lost Declan Rice this summer, but seems to have replaced him pretty well with the business you've done. James Ward-Prowse looks like an excellent addition, someone that we all know about. How do you assess that transfer business?
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. I mean, they took their time, and there was a little bit of a worry at the start in the first few months where there was very little business happening. I think they were trying to keep their eye on quite a few targets that could have gone elsewhere, but didn't in the end. And you mentioned James Ward-Prowse. I think that's probably one of the best signings that they made this season, to be honest. I've watched a lot of James Ward-Prowse. I covered Southampton quite closely as well. So I know what he can offer the team. And, I mean, he started in such brilliant form as well. And you look at Edson Alvarez as well. Mohamed Kudus is a fantastic signing. They just kind of, they didn't go overboard. They spent the money that they had. They didn't try and, spend a huge amount of money. But I think they've signed quality in lots of different positions as well. I think Kostas Mavropoulos, which is a difficult name to pronounce at the best of times. We haven't really seen too much of him, but he'll come in at centre back, and I'm sure he'll provide some good cover there at the back. But yeah, those other three that I mentioned, Alvarez, Ward-Prowse, and Kudus, pretty much that was the Declan Rice money spent on those three players. And I think if you weigh them up in both hands and what they actually mean for West Ham, Declan Rice was a massive part of it, but those three can add so much more to the equation. So I think it was a really good summer, to be honest.
Aside from like the obvious ones, I think of James Ward-Prowse as a danger man. Give him a free kick from 20-25 yards. I'm going to be nervous about it. Who's kind of the main threat that Villa should be wary of from the West Ham side of things?
I think Lucas Paquetá is obviously one of the big ones. Yeah. He obviously had a huge potential move over the summer that collapsed to Manchester City, but it doesn't seem to have affected him. He's started the season really strongly. He's a fantastic player. You mentioned Eddie Buendia there. I think they're very similar in that regard, being able to kind of unlock the line and find players. I think the striker is Mikel Antonio started well, but I think there is a very much people know that's not a long term kind of option for West Ham. So for me, it's the trouble for Aston Villa will be in the midfield. West Ham's midfield is mobile, and it's the support runners, it's the second balls, trying to get in behind. So I'd be mainly focused on that. We mentioned Ward-Prowse, but yeah, definitely Paquetá as well. And Alvarez can get forward a little bit as well. Souček has got a threat in him too. But I'd say definitely Ward-Prowse and Paquetá are the ones in that midfield that Villa are going to need to keep a really close eye on.
And let's reverse that question then. Who from the Villa side of things are you concerned about? Because we've got a good side now, a good first 11 at least, and there's threats across that team. It's
a really good 11. I've really enjoyed watching Aston Villa. I mentioned I've done a bit of Brighton this year, so I saw that game at Villa Park recently where you blew them away, which was fantastic. But no, I think there's talent all across. Personally, I love John McGinn. He's always been one of my favourite players, and I love watching him play. I know he's not more well. He does pop up with a goal every now and again, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But I love the way he tidies everything over in midfield. So I'd be looking at him, and then the forwards, Diaby, is it Bailey, Watkins in great form as well. It's a lot to handle, and Unai's seems to have everyone singing off the same hymn sheet. So West Ham are going to have to be really, really disciplined. I mentioned their win against Brighton at the Amex, where they kind of changed their style almost altogether when they were dealing with a side that enjoy playing with the ball, enjoy playing attacking possession football, and it actually worked for them. They kind of held back. They had their game plan. That was away at the Amex as well. So maybe David Moyes is thinking about kind of doing something similar against Villa because of all that creative attacking talent that he's going to have to deal with.
Villa obviously have a brilliant record at Villa Park specifically, 10 wins consecutively in the Premier League there for them at Villa Park. So we'll end with my fifth and final question, as always, on these parts of the show with a score prediction. For some reason, I should probably look into this. Obviously, I'm recording this with you before I do the rest of the show with John later. I feel like Villa and West Ham is like a bit of a bogey side for us, but I need to probably check the results to confirm that. But I have this feeling that we never seem to do well against West Ham. I'll save my score prediction for the rest of the show and let you get yours out of the way. How do you see it from your side of things?
That's a cop-out from you. You said the form there at home, which is a little bit worrying because I usually like to back a draw in these games. But I've got to go with a 2-2. I think there's going to be goals here as well. And I think West Ham have showed a real bite this season, which I didn't really see from them much last year, especially when they kind of go behind in games and things like that. They seem to really rally around each other. So I'm not expecting Villa to be an easy task at all. I think you're definitely going to score some goals, and I don't think the West Ham defence has been, perfect. But then, there are openings at the other end of the pitch. So yeah, I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw, and we'll decide at the end of the weekend whether that was stupid or not.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to chat to you, and we'll carry on with the rest of the show. I'm going to go away from match day because there's a few things that have happened on this week off that I've had that I'm probably not as up to speed with as I would like to be. So I would like you to inform me on a couple of those things. They are Nicolo Zaniolo and the betting scandal, for want of a better word, which is not the right word to describe Zaniolo because it doesn't seem like he's really done anything. And also the Vissel Kobe, not quite sure, the partnership, acquisition, again, whatever the word is there. That's two things I briefly want you to talk about. Yep. We'll start with Nicolo Zaniolo. What's happened here? What is this story?
Obviously, it's been caught up in the three players. Firstly, I think the authorities are investigating, or that they're looking at, should we say, more than 40 Italian players. I think the three that obviously hit the news, Townley, the Juventus player, and Zaniolo. The Juventus player is obviously banned for 7 months. He, I believe, admitted that he had been placing bets on football, and Townley, I believe, has also admitted that as well. We'll see what happens with Townley. We know about the Juventus player. The difference with Zaniolo is that he is adamant that he hasn't betted on football. That's the information we have. So these illegal betting websites that they're reported to be illegal. This is the kind of the crux of the investigation anyway. Zaniolo may have, his agent says he may have used some illegal websites without kind of knowledge of that. And he's, as the statement that the club released said, he's fully cooperating with the investigation. But the key is that he is adamant that he hasn't bet on football, which would mean there would be no ban for him.
Yeah, it feels like a pretty complex case as an overall. It feels like Zaniolo's involvement is lesser than that, and if he's available for selection, that probably tells you kind of what you need to know.
Townley is available for selection as well, because again, he hasn't been found guilty of anything.
Fair enough.
However, Townley, I believe, has admitted to have betted on football, I believe. Zaniolo, the difference being that he hasn't done that, and obviously that's where the sporting side of it comes into it. You'd have thought Townley would then get a lengthy ban, and Zaniolo wouldn't because he hasn't bet on football.
Given the complexity of the case, then away from the legal minefield that this conversation is, what is Zaniolo's headspace like for this weekend? Like, yes, he's available for selection, but will he play? Will he feature? Will he? Is it better to keep him out of the limelight?
No, I think he'll feature. I'm pretty certain he'll be in the matchday squad. I don't think he'll be affected by it. Let's put it this way: if he wasn't in the right headspace, he wouldn't be training, or he wouldn't be involved heading into what is going to be an important game on Sunday. And as we say, as far as we know, he's going to be included, and he'll probably feature at some point as well. So
let's move on to the other topic I mentioned then. Vissel Kobe, V Sports and Aston Villa. We love a V, don't we, with Vittoria and Vegas villains and whatnot. Talk to me a little bit about this partnership, if that's the right word.
Yeah, I'm really excited by it, actually. Obviously, Villa's holding company, Sawira Edens, they are expanding their network of clubs. They've cast the net, haven't they? And far and wide, and they're picking up these different teams, as you mentioned there, Dan. Vegas Villains, although that hasn't come off yet. That's one part of the world. Now they're moving into Asia with Vissel and Vissel. I'm not too sure.
We need to educate ourselves, don't we, on these pronunciations?
We know Vitoria, and then ZFC as well in Egypt. So I'm excited by it because, and I wrote a piece about it on Birmingham Live. If viewers want to go back and read it, I hope you do, because it took a bit of research. But I was already aware of how basically the Japanese Football Federation are putting a lot of their resources into, as you'd expect, like youth development and coaching over there. But they have like genuine ambitions to be one of the top 10 nations, in terms of the FIFA rankings. And we're starting to see it in terms of how they apply themselves in the World Cup. Obviously, I think they only got knocked out of the World Cup the game after the group stage, but they beat Germany, they beat Spain, they took Croatia to penalties, I believe. So they had a very tough run, and they obviously did themselves proud. And they've got a lot of youngsters coming through at the moment. A lot of players like Matoma, who isn't a youngster necessarily, or Minamino anymore, but players that are playing in Champions League football, playing in European football. Like the J League was set up in 1992, 1993, and that was basically to make their national team competitive and actually get to World Cups. 20 years later, now they have players, as I say, playing in Europe, playing in Champions League. Some of the most exciting players in the world as well, like Kubo, who plays for Sociedad. Matoma is one of my favourite players in the Premier League. I'm sure many people agree as well. He's one of the best wingers in world football, really. And yes, the question is, well, how does this affect Aston Villa? I think it's good because we're putting different things in different places in the world, if that makes sense. Everything that we're doing in terms of tapping into the Portuguese market, Japanese market, the East Asia, obviously where Japan is. I think ZFC, obviously Egypt. They've got plans for America. I think there's an academy in Senegal or something along those lines as well. So there's plenty going on, and it is exciting. But just on the Japanese market itself, I can't talk about it, for 20 minutes now. But do go to the article that I wrote on Birmingham Live. Yeah,
it seems by all accounts a really, really good move, and I will link that piece you mentioned a couple of times in the YouTube and podcast description. If you want to go and read that, it'll be down below. My education for Vissel Kobe, first of all, what is their name? How do you pronounce it? Maybe worth a go, because this is such a nerdy point that I assume you won't know anything about. The J League, second division and third division are in the new Football Manager. So maybe you can have a quick look at Vissel Kobe on Football Manager and do some of your educating that way and find out about our new partnership. Let's move on to predicted 11 then. As I said earlier, I feel a little bit out of the loop with Villa things by taking this week off, but I assume it's pretty much as you were for Villa's go-to 11 for the West Ham game.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Dan, no fresh injury concerns. So my predicted 11 would be Martinez in goal, Cash, Pau Torres, Konsa, and Luca Dean, which is obviously a change actually from the game against Wolves, but I think I'll go back to a back four. Kamara Louise sitting and John McGinn supporting. Who've we got? Diaby and Watkins. And I'd probably play Leon Bailey actually off the right, just because I think he's done well in home games this season, linking with Diaby. Obviously, there's a Zaniolo there if needed, who will probably be more helpful from set pieces in terms of defending them, because we know that West Ham are Ward-Prowse crossing into. It's like the land of giants, isn't it? With West Ham, they've got huge targets in the box, so that will be an issue. And I don't think that's something that will be easily fixed. Even if Zaniolo plays instead of Bailey, for example, they're still going to threaten. So yeah, that will be something that might affect Emery's planning, and he may just play Carlos instead, just to have that extra security from set players.
And a bit more physicality as well. We go into predictions. I've loaded up the predictions table that I've got. John, you actually closed some ground on me in the previous fixture. You predicted 1-1 for the Wolves game, which is obviously spot on, earning you 3 points. I said a 2-1 Villa win, so nothing for me. So I've got 9 points overall now in the season. And you've got 7. There was a stage when I kind of leapt ahead of you a little bit, and you've turned that around and could turn it around even further with this game against West Ham. As we said, not got a great record against them, don't have a great record against David Moyes, but we do have a good record at Villa Park. Mark, in his preview, went with a Desmond, a 2-2. What are you saying?
I'm not usually this confident, but I'll say 2-0 Villa. Oh, to be honest, I'm not too sure I said 2-0 actually thinking about it. But yeah, we're good at home. I don't know. I just feel like it's one of those games where 4:30. Will it be under the lights? Maybe in like 60 minutes.
Yeah. It gets dark now. It's 5:30 as we record this, and it's pretty much dark here.
Yeah, so the third lights will be on. I don't know. I just feel quite confident about it. Although West Ham are a very good team and they're very difficult to break down and they'll be hard to beat. We beat Brighton 6-1, didn't we? So we can beat West Ham as well.
Yeah, I love how you started that by saying you're quite confident and within 30 seconds kind of started to talk yourself up a little bit. But 2-0 is decent enough. So I'm going to be totally rogue and go for something completely different and say 4-1 to Villa, obviously. I think West Ham will score, but I expect us to score goals. Probably not 4 in reality, but for the sake of juicing the predictions up a little bit, we're going 4-1 Villa. And hope that I'm right, of course.
Hope you're right, yeah.
Let us know in the comments down below what your predictions are for the game. And thank you for watching this episode of Inside Bodymoor. We'll be back on Sunday for the post-match reaction. That should be me and Matt. And then on Monday, we'll be back again for the Monday show to have a broader look at all things Aston Villa as we build up to that AZ Outmile game. John, thank you for joining me. Thanks everyone for watching or listening. And we'll see you Sunday.